COVID is nothing like a catalyst. COVID is something that out of the blue. You know, it's like a very bitter pill.
COVID-19 has certainly shaken things up.
Reality started kicking in when our customers were suffering.
It compels us to contemplate about life.
But I would say like COVID-19 really brings situation handling to a whole new level.
After a while, we made a decision a few months into COVID to actually shut down the Jakarta office.
Singapore is going to close its borders. Right?
We have to call them back and tell them that, hey, let's return back to Singapore.
The capacity of the restaurants has actually dropped.
Sales came down by more than half.
There is no right time or wrong time to start a business.
The pandemic has escalated the usage of digital tools, visualization.
COVID-19 has impacted our world, that we all know. But what many of us do not know are the positive stories, the positive angles of COVID-19.
In every challenge, there would be opportunities. I mean, that's how it is.
It is important for us to hear the stories so that we may rethink COVID-19. And perhaps this pandemic may have a positive impact on our lives. I was an education consultant to a school in the village of Kampong Chenang, in the Kampong Chenang province. Suddenly, COVID-19 struck and I was recalled to Singapore, and for the rest of my consultancy, I had to stay back in Singapore. I could not go back to Cambodia anymore. There was just so much negative news in the media.
Just moving around Singapore, it just felt like doom and gloom. And we started believing that COVID was real.
I felt it was my duty to do this documentary, to provide the positive angle, the positive anecdotes that I think we need to hear. 9 companies were willing to talk to me about their journey, about their experience with COVID-19, and so my journey began.
Brothers and sisters, let's rise up and stand up!
The first person I met was Dr. Patrick Liu of Gex Ventures, and it was clear to me that COVID-19 had threatened his business. In Dr. Patrick Liu, I got to witness a very positive mindset, a mindset that would not give in to COVID-19.
On 3rd of April 2020, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong made the announcement that we were supposed to stay at home from 7th of April 2020. When I heard the announcement, my heart sank to the ground because my business is a brick and mortar business. I depend on face-to-face meetings with my clients. I thrive on group gatherings, I thrive on presentations, I thrive on forums, networks, and conferences. I gathered all my people together and I told them that we are going to turn the pandemic into a transformational moment. We are going to turn it to be the greatest opportunity of our business. Yes! We totally transform our business to become a technology business, an online business, and we provide all kinds of online services. And the interesting thing was that we were fixing our business model while facing different challenges. Business model transformation. Today, we are very proud of the fact that we are an online integrated with offline business.
Okay, what's the vision of the company? Creating wealth, impacting lives. What's the vision of the company? Building the world. What are the values of the company? R for? I for? Integrity. S for? Sustainability. E T for good job. Give yourself a big round of applause.
And I made a commitment to them that we will not retrench anybody. We will not cut their salary. We will not force anybody to go on a no pay leave, because that's what many companies were doing. We endeavor to have the happiest people to work in our company.
Okay, for our first activity, we're gonna do a treasure hunt. So what I need all of you all to do is the first person to find an object that is green in color is gonna win a prize. Let's go!
Green in color! Take it away, guys! Come on! The time is running!
I got it!
Business leaders should know that it is the people in their business that make their business work. It is the people in their organization that make their organization work.
Yes. During the circuit breaker measures, dining in at restaurants was not allowed. And there were restaurants that closed because of this, because of COVID-19. Yet, the co-founders of Big Fish, Small Fish refused to yield. Mr. Tam and Mr. Ong were resilient, and they refused to give up the fundamental feature of their restaurant, which is a dine-in restaurant. They refused to change that. They strategized, they adapted the business, and they managed their finances very, very carefully until COVID-19 was of a lesser threat to them. Mr. Tam and Mr. Ong, they were resilient. They refused to give up. They refused to change that core feature of the dine-in restaurant.
In the industry, I also noticed that some players, they were not ready. Although they were doing very well pre-COVID, when the circuit breaker hit us, they were totally caught off guard. Some of them were not even on delivery platforms. And during the circuit breaker, they just decided to close shop and not operate at all.
Maybe before COVID-19, we have expanded overseas already, so that's part of our planning to go, Southeast Asia, like people, places like Philippines, Indonesia, all this. So, but when COVID kicks in, it's tense. I mean, we put a handbrake on that because we can't travel.
Naturally, we were worried because we did not know what's gonna happen. So, eventually, dining-in was stopped, and we had to rely on deliveries, takeaways. And that really threw us off because we were mainly Big Fish, Small Fish is a restaurant that's meant for dining-in.
The capacity dropped. During that CB time, I mean, people can't dine in, all this kind of thing. Like till now, okay, let's fast forward until till now. Yeah, I mean the main thing is the capacity of the restaurants has actually dropped due to the 1 meter spacing of the safety measures.
During the lockdown, our business was badly affected. Sales came down by more than half.
If you see the total capacity, I mean we dropped at least 30 to 40%.
Because of the 1 meter?
Yes, because of 1 meter spacing.
So I gathered my partner, Rayson, and we talked about how we should respond to it. And we spoke to our staff. We started with a pay cut. We reduced our costs. We terminated some of our support services like accounting services. We managed it on our own to try to keep the dock costs down. And after the circuit breaker, we re-strategized. We relooked at our operations, we relooked at our menu, and remarket the products. Like now, we try to encourage our customer to try the more premium fish that we have, and it worked. They tried the premium variety and they like it and they come back for it. So that gives us a better margin.
Need more manpower. Because last time we only need maybe 1 or 2 guys to clear the tables because everything is being very self-serve, that kind. Now instead of clearing the tables, on top of that we need to serve you, we need to prepare the sauces for you. Definitely the manpower have to stretch at least 1 or 2 headcount more.
Pre-COVID, our model, as I was saying, is pretty much self-service. Because of the COVID, we decided that we have to have some change in the operation model. So now customers do not help themselves to the sauces and they do not go take their own food. Now we serve them, we bring the food to them. And we even introduce cashless ordering at the table where they scan a QR code and they order directly from their mobile phones. So these are some of the changes that we have implemented to reduce the movement in the restaurants. We have a total of about 50 staff in the company, spread over 5 restaurants. And they could appreciate what we were facing. Most of the staff has been with us for a long time, and they were very supportive, and they agreed without giving problems. After the lockdown, when dine-in was allowed, we saw our sales slowly coming back up. Yeah, but we have not reached the 100% where we used to be at this point.
In my opinion, the companies Gex Ventures and Big Fish Small Fish, they were supposed to go down like many businesses did during the pandemic, but they did not. In the case of Gex Ventures, Dr. Patrick Liu pivoted his business, and in the case of Big Fish Small Fish, they dig in their boots and persevered through the pandemic. So yeah, we have two scenarios here. It's either you change the concept of your business to adapt to the new realities, or you persevere like Big Fish Small Fish. In my opinion, a third company was also supposed to go down, and that's Zmart. And why do I say this? Many of the clients were suffering, were making losses, but surprisingly, they managed during this period to increase their clientele. Their business grew. Now, why is that so?
Zmart is a B2B, so business-to-business platform for the F&B industry. So specifically, it's for restaurants, cafes, hotels to use us as to procure all their raw materials. That means their food, even their disposables from their different suppliers in a digitized manner.
Zmart is a food tech platform with a mission to lower the cost of goods for the F&B businesses. And why we're doing this is because we found that many F&B businesses 50% shut in 3 years. The number escalates to 70-80% in 5 years. So it's a very, very tough business, and we have found that lots of small businesses don't focus their energies and efforts in cost of goods. So our goal is to look at how we can bring down cost of goods. 35% of revenue is actually spent in cost of goods. We are looking to bring it down to 25%, trying to add 10% back to their bottom line.
We were actually very, very energized and very confident for the year 2020. And then of course when the news struck, everybody panicked.
And unfortunately, the investors pulled out of that round. So it put us in a position where we had lots of big plans that we had to scale back, and we would have sort of ran out of money within 3 to 4 months of that time frame. So June we were expecting to run out of money. So as a team, we had to sit down and rethink how we operate to try and stretch this.
The buying volume actually dropped by more than half. Yeah, so definitely because I think once a circuit breaker hit, a lot of restaurants lost their dine-in, right? So and not a lot of restaurants were actually ready to do takeaways or deliveries.
And we knew that the first 2 quarters of last year was going to be the most difficult period for us to even raise money. I think even getting meetings was tough. Everyone has cold feet in investing. So we had no choice but to really rethink of how we can look at what we have and extend our runway to as long as possible.
After a while, we made a decision a few months into COVID to actually shut down the Jakarta office because it was very hard for us to I think as a startup we actually need a lot of we used to travel a lot every week, back to Jakarta to meet with the team, to meet with prospective clients, and if you can't do that, we didn't know how long that would be for. It didn't make sense to really keep the office running.
We were running out of cash. We were unable to get meetings with investors. We knew we had to cut, but we had to agree that we even had to cut and accept that we had to cut. Then the question of how do we cut and who do we cut? We needed guidance on this because we didn't know how long this is going to pan out. Is it a short-term sort of a thing? Can we put some funds into the company, find ways to do it, borrow money? Or should we think about this as a 12-month period or an 18-month period, and we need to cut for this 12 to 18 months and sustain much longer? So when you cut, are you cutting to extend for 3 months? Or are you cutting to extend for 6 months? Are you cutting to extend for 12 months? And that will tell you how much to cut. So we needed some guidance and advice on some of these things. And we relied on our board to help us navigate through this, and we had very, very experienced members of the board that we could rely on to really have this debate with us, to look at all the different aspects of our business.
How did you decide who to let go and who to stay on?
Wow, very interesting question. I think it's an extremely tough decision to make, and we didn't want to react because of COVID-19 and make drastic changes that become irreversible. So how we planned our business was looked at the different areas of our business and tried to pick out the core drivers that is going to create the immediate impact and create sustainability for us over the next 12 months. So for us, the question is, what do we need to keep as bare bones so that we can sustain the business for the next 12 months? That was the deciding basis for us to think about who we keep and who we let go.
In a way, we look at it as it was a good outcome for us, because it helped to convert a lot of these non-techies to use tech, and that made it easier then for us to reach out to them. So instead of maybe a couple of meetings in a day, a lot of the business development team could do a lot more meetings, because they didn't have to travel from point to point, spend maybe 1 hour having a coffee, then so they could squeeze in more meetings in a day. So I think that was the good part about the technology adoption that came out of COVID-19.
So we were about 75 people then. Today we are about 35 people. So we had to cut almost about 40 people in our organization. So you can say it's like we had to cut more than half of our strength, which is a big move. So we took on a faster pace, reduced our team size. We had to keep the ship going. Extended our runway till December, and then 3 months before December we managed to raise more money and set things back right. Today we run a much tighter ship. We know that we need to find ways to improve the way we work and look at a leaner workforce, just like an internet business or an internet company.
Did your business grow, or has it grown?
It grew, but I would say that definitely not as much as the previous year. But I think the positive is that it still grew.
Now, how was this possible that Z-Mart grew during the pandemic when their clients were suffering? Z-Mart helped solve fundamental challenges faced by restaurants. Coupled with the right technology, they not only weathered the COVID-19 storm, but they managed to grow. Z-Mart grew and is still growing today. With the rise of e-publishing, many traditional publishing companies and bookshops have been hit hard in the last 2 decades. Now, coupled with the COVID-19 pandemic, I am sure that for some of them, it proved too much. And so I wondered how Marshall Cavendish Education, the publisher I was writing and am writing for, cope with COVID-19.
Well, I would say that Marshall Cavendish Education is an educational solutions provider. We are a homegrown company based in Singapore. We have been doing textbook publishing since the late 1960s, and we have been in Singapore for the last 60 over years. So we've had quite a lot of experience developing textbooks for the Singapore market. And in the 1990s, we had the opportunity to expand overseas because of the good reputation of the Singapore education system. So we see ourselves as, I guess, carrying the Singapore flag as we go overseas. Educational publishing is very related to what's happening in the schools. If schools are affected, if schools are disrupted, then obviously our business will be affected. So I would say that our business in Singapore has been relatively stable. I think the Singapore government was very quick to respond at the onset of COVID-19. Schools were closed for a relatively short period of time. And during that time, we noticed a sudden surge in requests for digital versions of our print textbooks. We worked very quickly with MOE, we worked very quickly with schools to respond to these requests to convert our print content into ebooks so that teachers could do home-based learning. Retail was obviously affected because bookstores were closed, and even after bookstores were open, buying has not been the same as before. But I would say that the business in Singapore has been relatively stable compared to what's happening overseas. In many parts of the world, schools remain closed, and in fact, many students have missed an entire year of schooling. In that sense, our international business has been adversely affected because if schools don't open, then there is no need to buy books. If there is so much uncertainty in the opening or closing of schools, then committees are not going to convene to decide on new textbook programs. So in that sense, the impact was adverse to us. However, just like in the Singapore market, we saw an uptick in the increase of digital usage. Because teachers have to deliver their lessons online, so obviously they needed our materials in digital form. They needed interactive materials as well to engage the students, because it is now even harder to engage the students as before when things were taking place in a classroom environment. So we had to deliver our services and offerings in a very different manner. My team in particular had issues because a lot of us are working on using desktops because our creative team needs very powerful machines. I remember spending a lot of time communicating to the team as to what needs to happen if we are all called to work from home the next day. I remember nagging at them to learn how to use the company's video conferencing software. But what was a very pleasant surprise to me was that when the call to work from home came, things were very smooth. People seemed to know what to do, and we very quickly transited into using video conferencing, and it was not as chaotic as I had imagined it to be. Market has changed, our customers have changed, but the situation is still evolving. We have to keep our ears to the ground and be able to constantly adapt and evolve, and to be able to respond fast as the changes happen. Digital is definitely here to stay. I think the challenge for many educational publishers is how to monetize the digital resources that we have developed. So far, our customers have expected the digital resources to be given free together with the print programs. And whether this increase in digital use will result in new revenue streams for us, which we all of course hope to have, or it will mean increased investment with no returns, I think that's something that this balance of being able to justify that digital investment with continued business sustainability and viability is something that we have to tread this, I guess, very thin line.
It has adapted so well in the previous decades to the different needs of the industry that when COVID-19 struck, Marshall Cavendish Education was able to provide many solutions that other publishers could not provide. And so, Marshall Cavendish Education is ahead of the other publishers in this publishing game. It has successfully evolved with the times. Another company that, like Marshall Cavendish Education, that has evolved with the times is Andalus Corporation, an education company with more than 10 centers all over the island. Effective strategic planning, great teamwork, and the early adoption of technology. These were factors, I believe, saved Andalus from the destructive impact of COVID-19.
We were very concerned about the financial implication, and we monitor the figures very carefully on a daily basis. And analysis were done on a weekly, daily, weekly, monthly basis. So we do not want to have a knee-jerk reaction, and just pluck things from the air and responding in a way which is haphazard. So we form a task force, covering major areas, for example, finance, education, management, and each task force have their team. So, of course, how to attend to parents or student in need. So, and with this task force we meet every other week, almost every week, and they're supposed to look at the issues and how to respond to them, and the best way to mitigate. So far, based on what we have done, the first initial 3 to 6 months, we are able to bring some kind of stability. We have scenarios, for the next 3-5 years, things that we can preempt, and something that is beyond our expectation. So strategic planning is very important, depending on the size of the organization, and particularly Andalus. And also we have operational meeting to go through the numbers in a very directed, organized manner, to make sure that everything are in place and things are in place, and when there's any issues, we know how to mobilize the resources in terms of the finances, manpower, the facilities, and so on and so forth. And we even invested in a lot of IT facilities. We provide all the teachers with a laptop, a high-end laptop on individual basis. So we nearly spent about 100,000. And then we invested on our content development, provide it over the internet. We have a studio which is fully equipped, and those things require significant investment. And the classrooms that we quickly wired up, so it's connected via internet seamlessly. We are quite fortunate because we have the BESQC, Business Excellence and Singapore Quality Class. So this exposed us to think in a very comprehensive, structured manner. All the drivers, as in leadership, as in processes, the procedures, the customers, the finance, everything in a matrix. So we don't see things in isolation. Everything is interrelated, and how actually we respond to the different prerogatives in organized manner, which is, to me, we're quite fortunate being an SME, that we are able to embark on this since 2015. So one of the elements of BSQC is benchmarking, best practices in government or non-government agencies, and how actually we position ourselves, what the areas of concern that we can improve. Benchmark ourselves against what is being done by the universities, and by the polytechnics, by the schools. What are the best practices, and what we ought to learn more. And I think it's difficult to fail once we benchmark against such institutions which are well financed and with very organized systems and procedures. So benchmarking, to me, it's very important for Andalus.
anyone who have seen the marketing videos by Property Lim Brothers will acknowledge that the company is at the forefront of real estate marketing in Singapore.
We were anticipating sales volume to drop. We prepped everybody just to remain positive. We only had that one day to shift all the equipments to my home, to some of my guys' home, who were usually the video presenters. So our media team immediately packed everything, went to my home, pasted all the tapes on the floor on the tripod position, sent the equipment to my guys' home and all that. And we took that one day to film some of the properties that we have not launched yet. We quickly contacted our clients and then filmed the place. And we quickly researched what additional equipments, wires we need for audio and all that kind of stuff. Quickly went down to purchase. At the start of the circuit breaker, we told all our people that we will not reduce salary, we will not retrench any of them, and we will hold on as long as we can if our finances allows us. So definitely, because we have a huge back-end team, our operations are a little bit different from a one-man show salesperson. We did had a dip in terms of our revenue versus expense because we had to sustain the manpower cost and stuff. So we told everybody that let's just create content, let's just continue to add value to our customers, and we want to see mid to long term. Yeah, so thankfully we were able to sustain that period for that 2 to 3 months. We didn't retrench anyone, and after that we started employing. Yeah, because there were a lot of pent-up demand. We started to increase our manpower 3 months after the circuit breaker. Yeah. Main challenge that happened was the sudden shift to work from home, where we have a huge back-end team, and we are always in the culture of creating content. So because of this, we couldn't go and film content, and we have a lot of properties that are coming up that our owners have just newly appointed us to sell. So during that last few days before the circuit, we were rapidly going out to film whatever we can, and during that circuit breaker season, it was a standstill. So we couldn't create content for newer homes to keep the synergy and motivation of the team strong. Yeah, because everybody is too long at home already, and we needed that positivity and culture to keep the company focused in a sense. The transaction volume in Singapore has always been pretty healthy at quite a same rate pre-COVID. Yeah, majority of the people still prefer to wait until the circuit breaker is over. It was effective for only 3 months in terms of transaction volume, and then after that it sort of exploded because there were a lot of pent-up demand. The circuit breaker has brought about a shift in preferences, and it has increased the interest in properties. Yeah, which then brought about an expansion in our business. Some of our partners and friends in the renovation industry, they're also seeing an uptick in their business because a lot of people are just renovating, upgrading their interior renovation in their home because they are not traveling, they have the extra funds, and they just want to make their space more efficient by adding a pantry here, more workspaces at home and stuff. So renovation has also been booming since then. Yeah, so I think real estate falls into that spectrum that because of the shift and change in preferences, this market is right now in a very buoyant phase.
The circuit breaker, a period where many other agencies found it difficult to market properties, this same period provided Property Lim Brothers with a window to expand their clientele base in Singapore significantly. And this could only happen because Property Lim Brothers had made preparations way before COVID-19. There are very few farms in Singapore And so it was a unique experience for me to visit Seng Chun Farm.
Currently, Singapore produces about 28% of eggs locally. So still 72% are imported from overseas. No matter how hard we try, we are just more expensive than imported eggs from our neighbors. At the beginning of COVID, I think there were a lot of reported cases in Singapore compared to the rest of the world. So naturally, the workers, especially the foreign workers, are very concerned about working in Singapore because they feel that I think they are getting calls from their family members to go back to their countries because they feel that it's safer at home than to work in Singapore. So I think that is really the time when they were like picking out stories from non-mainstream media. I do not know what they were picking out, but then the company has to reassure them that Singapore is doing all they can to protect workers in Singapore, and every time there's a new regulation, we have to explain to them like the rationale behind them. At the beginning, we have some staff who just wanted to go back home. So I think about 2 of our staff went back home, and the rest of the staff, we managed to convince them that it's still safe to work in Singapore, it's still safe to work at our farm, and we have implemented a lot of safety measures for them. So be it the segregation of workplace, the segregation of rooms, or the putting up of screens. So we help them to buy the rice, the biscuits, the instant noodles, and just give it to them like a standardized item, a package for everyone. So everyone will have like a basket of goods which we think are the staples. Say like COVID-19 really brings situation handling to a whole new level. We can be like running out of feed ingredients, we can be running out of packaging materials or labels, or like a new government regulation just comes out and then suddenly we are short of manpower. So it's really like every day we have to deal with a new situation. One point of time we were running out of a key feed ingredient. So fortunately, I think we have to thank the government because ESG is working very hard round the clock. Every day is like we have a direct liaison officer. We could speak to them like what issues we face that day. Day to day we face new issues, and at one point in time we're running so short of a key ingredient. And for some feed ingredients, if we don't have the feed ingredients, I think if we have a shortage of that, there's an imbalance of the nutrients. Probably in 1 week's time, the eggs would not come out. So the government paid a lot of attention to eggs because it's such a necessary ingredient in a lot of recipes. So through the link up of ESG, we managed to buy the ingredients direct to the feed majors. Usually we don't even talk to the feed majors because we are just a very, very small user. So I think ESG through its connections link up with the feed majors, and then we were able to get alternate sources from Thailand, from Vietnam within 1 or 2 weeks. So that is really thankful for the government's help. You need a lot of adaptability, a lot of creativity to solve situations that arises from COVID. I would say the safety measures put in a lot of inconveniences for us. For example, we have to put in screens in between operators when they're packing their eggs, and this reduces the efficiency of how we operate, because I think before COVID the emphasis was how to be efficient, how to use less manpower to drive down the cost of production, such that our cost of production is not so high compared to imported eggs. Because only when we narrow the gap of production, then we are viable to say that we can compete head on with imported eggs just on quality and freshness, and people just pay us the small premium.
It is clear that COVID-19 has affected most, if not all, businesses in Singapore. Seng Chun Farm had to immediately resolve the many challenges that suddenly popped up during COVID-19.
As a startup.
The startups.
As a technology startup.
And towards the end of my documentary research, I realized that a good part of Singapore's future lies in the hands of a special group of companies called startups. Now, startups are not only new companies, but they are companies that provide unique solutions, unique products, unique services to the people. Grab, a multi-billion-dollar company, is actually a startup.
Sausage was started by myself and actually my dad. I mean, the name Sausage is really coming from sauce as in source code in programming, and Sage is my dad who has the domain expertise. And the main idea behind that name, before I jump into the background, was really in digitizing the domain knowledge of SMEs, because my dad operated an SME in the chemical trading space into a digital platform. And then of course that concept was more widespread now in terms of digitizing individual SME in retail, in chemical, in wholesale trade space, and across different angles, right? So that's our core offering and original motivation in that sense. Sausage
was partly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Quick action by Mr. Sin Tian Min ensured the company was safe and the Singapore clientele was grown.
We make a really swift and decisive action, which was, okay, we are not going to rent offices anymore. Singaporeans come back to Singapore. For those of you who comes from different parts of, say, India or Vietnam, you go back to your respective homes, and because you don't want to be renting a place in a city that you do not originate from, and you work from home. So we had that swift decision happening in sort of foreign offices. In Singapore, of course, we then have to work with our head of operations to think about how do we stagger our time, how do we work from home, what's the arrangement in terms of reporting. And at the end of the day, as a tech company, because a lot of work we do is based on deployments of new features and sales, and that was easy to track for most part. So we don't really have that much of a problem, I would say, from an operation standpoint in Singapore. COVID was a game changer for us. In 2020, we realized that there was a great trend where many of these larger companies were cutting back their budgets. And in terms of payment terms, a lot of payment terms were also delayed in that fashion. So what we did in 2020 was really in terms of trying to iron out a different path where we can generate new revenue, especially on the SME side, because government were pushing for digitization for many of these traditional SME locally. So we pivoted our business from focusing on foreign MNCs where it's difficult to travel and engage them to get businesses, to local SMEs where they became our main target audience for the revenue point of view. So we developed new product lines in order to serve these SMEs locally, which now we call it the online stores. From revenue standpoint, it has affected us, of course. We weren't prepared for that, but I think it was due to our flexibility of our team, and of course the fast response time in building new product lines that allow us to develop new revenue streams that could enhance our collaboration with other partners in the ecosystem. So for us, software revenue as a tech company or a SaaS company is a major contributor of our top line and thus bottom line as well. And with delayed payments or even companies which we fear they would default on contract would obviously sort of affect our top line and thus bottom line. One of the key things that went through our mind back then was, okay, if our sort of revenue was contributed by these top 5 MNCs, if any one of them were to just pull out, or 2 of them were to pull out, right, it's a game of probability, then 20%, 40% of revenue would immediately drop. So there was a general sort of sentiment from a senior management standpoint, and also the board of directors, that what would happen in such case. So on our feet, during July or even April season, we start then to pivot our product line to include, could actually SMEs locally become our target audience. So our large e-commerce sort of technology platform was split up into smaller packets of software that could be utilized as an online store for SMEs. And that actually, although that's not a large revenue contributor, that actually helped to sustain certain parts of our bills in that sense, because we have to pay off for server costs, and variety of things, including manpower expenses. One of the key advantages of Sausage is to really push products from SME side into the procurement software of MNCs. So MNCs could essentially buy within their procurement environment from SMEs who are utilizing our e-commerce connector or solution. For Sausage itself, our key innovation wasn't really about providing similar features as opposed to, say, the likes of Shopify or Shopmatic or many of these WooCommerce and Wix platform out there. Our main innovation was to really embed the B2B portion and B2C portion into a single e-commerce platform layer.
Now, knowing that startups play a key role in the provision of unique and new services and products, I sought out Meet Ventures, which is a company that works with many startups. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Meet Ventures was able to grow not only because it was lucky, but because it provided a service that MNCs and startups need.
Meet Ventures is an innovation consultancy firm, so we specialize in helping listed companies, MNCs, government agencies to work with startups in the region. So what does innovation consultancy mean, right? It means that when a corporate or MNC, when they have certain challenges, some pain points or problems that they would like to solve, maybe they might not be able to solve it fast enough, or certain limitations within their own organization structure might limit them from doing it themselves. That's where we come in and we help them to work with external parties such as startups to solve those problems.
On the weekend, I was actually in Indonesia, so I was conducting a startup workshop in Batam, right? In one of the entrepreneurship incubators, and of course, news had broken out, right? That by a certain date, Singapore is going to close its borders, right? And I think that was probably the announcement was like, I got the message on a Sunday, and they said you got to come back by Tuesday. I took the last boat out, right, out of Batam on that day. I said I should get myself out, right, and get myself to the safety of my own country, which I know Singapore would be very safe.
Previously, we did that by flying down to different countries around the region, meeting the startups face to face, and establishing a relationship with them. But because of COVID, we weren't able to travel, and because of that, we also decided that we had to think of different ways to reach out to startups from around the region. So what we did was we started to establish partnerships with top organizations around the region. Examples include like Magic from Malaysia, Startup Brunei from Brunei, Philippines Software Industry Association from the Philippines. So we signed MOUs with them, and we got them to reach out to these startups on our behalf. And then once this organization partners manage to identify these startups, they introduce them to us. We have a Zoom call, and we were able to take things forward from there. So I think this was one of the key unexpected outcomes from COVID, which benefited our business.
Since the programs that we're doing helps MNCs work with startups to generate more revenue, maybe in that sense, companies are probably more open, because I think at the end of the day, these are operations that will continue to help them to enhance their earnings.
I think Meet Ventures is very lucky because during this period we actually managed to grow in terms of number of employees, in terms of number of clients.
Pandemic or not, we have to always be alert to see what the demands of the market is.
One of the key lessons that COVID has taught us is that if we don't move fast enough, two things can happen. One thing is that something unexpected like COVID could come in and force us to make the next move and make the change. Or by the time we see all our competitors doing it, then we make the move. But by then it might be a bit too late. Then we will become the latecomers. So to be able to critically think, identify the problems, identify potential solutions, and use this to improve your existing business, your existing company, your existing solutions. I think this is one of the key skills required in the next few years and even in the longer period.
What will also benefit our youths will be a better understanding of Asia, and primarily the ASEAN, China, India region.
I think there's some lessons that we can extract from this documentary. The positive mindset. And if you realize all the entrepreneurs are positive, they are not going to give up easily. They believe that they can succeed in almost all circumstances, and they embrace change because of this positive mindset. The value of strategic planning, the consultation with people within their board and outside their boards on planning what they should do in the near future, in a future far ahead in time. Now, this is an important company behavior that should be embraced, no matter how big or small you are. So there is that seeking out of people who are qualified, who are knowledgeable, who are experts, who are specialists in certain fields, and to get their input. One key trait of these companies is resilience. They do not give up easily. They believe they have to weather the storm, no matter how bad the storm is. They are willing to struggle in the present and in the future so that their business thrive. When I started this documentary, I wasn't sure what the final outcome would be. However, today, at the end of this journey, I can conclude that successful companies who have weathered the COVID-19 storm must possess qualities that are similar to qualities possessed by successful people. They have to have a positive mindset. They have to be knowledgeable and skilled. They have to be resilient. They got to be decisive. They have to plan strategically for their lives, whether it be the lives of their companies or their personal lives.